appreciate that. So now the lesson title is Injustice Will Be Punished. We're coming out of the book of Esther. And the book of Esther is an interesting book in that it does not mention God at any point. It is an interesting book in that we have a group of people still in captivity, and that's the Jews. They were taken from Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar, which is a different story. And now they are under Ahasuerus, who is also known as Xerxes. One and the same. So you have to know a little bit about the history and the background of why and how this lesson came about. So this lesson came about because Esther and Mordecai, the uncle, are living in this foreign land, but they are still Jews. So in the background, King Ahasuerus was married to a queen, Vashti, and Vashti decided that she would not perform in front of the king once he had partied and he was in a drunken state. So we'll talk about Ahasuerus or Xerxes, we'll talk about Mordecai, we'll talk about Esther, and then we'll talk about someone named Haman out of this 7th chapter of the book of Esther. The king now needed a new wife because he felt like, or his counselors felt like, if the king allowed Vashti, his first wife, to do whatever she wanted to do, then everybody else, every other woman in the kingdom was going to do the same against their husband. So the king put her away. And then when we get to the rest of the lesson, as you go on in chapters 1 and 2, the king decided that he needed a wife. He needed a queen. In needing this queen, now what we find is that, yes, we need a queen, but also what happens is that we need to find somebody out of the king. Now Ahasuerus was ruler over 120 something places, provinces, and so he looked out among all the people. What we know about Esther is that Esther was among all the people that Ahasuerus or Xerxes was looking at. And Esther, in going in this beauty pageant, biggest beauty pageant ever found, in going in this beauty pageant, Esther was the one who, Esther now becomes queen. But she doesn't reveal her heritage. She doesn't reveal that she's a Jew. She doesn't reveal her culture. She doesn't reveal anything like that, but she's in this big beauty pageant. She wins and she becomes the next queen. She is a Jew. So Mordecai is her uncle and he is also a Jew. When we get to this lesson, or right before we get to this lesson in chapter 7 of this, Injustice Will Be Punished, we find that there is another player. So we've talked about the king Ahasuerus, we've talked about Esther, we've talked about Mordecai. So the fourth player that you see in this story is a guy called Haman. Haman, we find, is an Amalekite. And the Jews and the Amalekites had so much more enmity or enemy. They were enemies. They didn't like each other. They didn't even pretend to be friends. The culture of the Amalekites and the culture of the Jews was that they never got together as friends. They always clashed. Well, Haman became the person who was right next to the king. He did whatever the king said. He was next in line to the king. he ruled, he did all of those things. The king was Haman was the one. Haman gets elevated right beside the king, and as he is going past the palace gates, he sees a man who refuses to bow down to him. This man is one of the players that we talked about, Mordecai. Mordecai has interest or investment in the palace, not so much because he was the king, but he had investment in the palace because his niece was there. Esther had become queen, and now she lived in the palace. Haman passes by and he sees this man sitting and not bowing down when he passed by. The princes, the other guys who were underneath Haman, would come along and Mordecai would not bow. Haman would come by and Mordecai would not bow. So what happens is that Haman says, who is this dude that will not bow? He needs to be punished because he should be bowing to us. And the princes revealed to him that this man is a Jew. Haman, realizing that his culture is always against or always fighting against the Jews, says, oh my goodness, he's a Jew. Let's eradicate the Jews. So what we see as far as the Holocaust goes, this is not the first time that we see the Jews trying to eradicate or get rid of the Jews. But I want you to know that regardless to how unjust someone becomes or how unjust someone is, if you know the Lord and if you are following after the Lord, you have to know that injustice will be punished. So Mordecai is sitting at the temple gate. Mordecai is sitting there every day passing by because he is invested in his niece, Esther. Esther, remember, has not revealed that she is a Jew. She hadn't revealed her background. She hadn't revealed her heritage. She hadn't revealed all of that. Haman plots. Haman plans. Haman does all kinds of things in order to make sure that Mordecai and all of the Jews are eradicated. He goes to the king. He goes to the king and he says, hey, king, there's a bunch of people in your provinces. They are scattered throughout. They are everywhere. And as they are scattered everywhere, these people need to be, they're not really where they should be. We should just kill them off. Can I write a petition so that we can kill these people? And the king says, thinking that Haman has his best interest at heart, says, do what you will. I will give you my signet ring and I will allow you to eradicate this group of people. Now, the king did not know, one, that it was the Jews, two, that his wife was a Jew, because Esther did not reveal that she was a Jew. So now you're into this political thing where Haman in chapter 6, in chapter 5, he passes by the gate one time and he says, Esther, Mordecai is still not standing, but the queen has invited me to a banquet. It's just going to be me, Haman, the king, and Esther. I'm so excited. When he comes from the banquet, Haman is sitting there with his robes on, and he's sitting at the gate. Haman gets mad and he goes home and he goes, I am so excited about being with the queen and the king. I am so excited that all of this is going on. And you know what? Because of this, I feel like something needs to be done. So his friends and his wife say, hey, you know what? You need to do something about Mordecai even before all of this happens. And so they counseled Haman to build gallows 50 cubits high or 75 feet high so that everybody could see. So here's the injustice part. He did not do this because he had the king's interest at hand. He didn't do this because he was looking out for the king. He did this because his culture and Mordecai and Esther's culture had always clashed because they were enemies. So when we look at this lesson, we know that Haman has an ulterior motive for wanting to hang Mordecai. He's already got a petition to kill all of the people that are Jews. He's already got a petition. It's already been sent out through the land. So when they get to the banquet with the queen, they get to the banquet and the queen says, hey, can you come another day? Can you come to the banquet again? And the banquet was a banquet. It wasn't like it was just a little bit of food and they had a tea party and they were drinking little sips of tea and little croutons. And no, not like that. They had a feast. Haman gets to the feast and the king asked her the second day in a row. He says, King, here we are in chapter 7, which is our lesson. The king and Haman went to the banquet with Esther, and the king says, what is your petition, Queen Esther? Whatever it is, it'll be granted unto you. Whatever is going on, it's going to be granted unto you. And what is your request? I will give you up to half of my kingdom, whatever your request is. He doesn't know what her request is. Haman doesn't know what her request is. She just requested that they come to the banquet 2 days in a row. Queen Esther has had all of the people, her and her uncle have had all the people fast. They have fasted so that she would have the right answer. So when we fast so that we may speak correctly, say the right things, so that we are not tearing into people and hurting people. We fast so that bounds of the wickedness are broken. We fast so that the captives are set free. So Esther says, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please you, let my life be given at my petition and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondsmen or bondwomen, I would have held my tongue, even though the enemy can't countervail the king's damage. So she doesn't even tell him at that point, hey, I'm a Jew. She says to him, King, if I have found favor in your sight, grant it to me that my life and my people's life is given into your hands. Even though, here's the deal, if I were a bondswoman, if I were a slave, because the Jews were free, kind of, sort of, in the provinces that King Ahasuerus or Xerxes had, if I were free, I would have held my tongue altogether. If I were a bondswoman, if I were a slave, if I were this, if I were that, but I'm not. And the enemy has written a letter to say, kill all my people and me, because I'm a part of my people. The king answered her, who is this and who has even thought this in their heart to kill you. Verse 6, Esther calls him out. The adversary, the enemy, not just an enemy of the Jews, but an enemy of God and an enemy of the king. The adversary, the enemy, is that wicked Haman. And then Haman was afraid. Remember, he had already plotted. He had already planned. He was planning on hanging Mordecai, the uncle, on the gallows. He was already planning his own feast because he knew he was going to be elevated. He was already planning. He was plotting. He had the soldiers send out the letters. He had all kinds of things going on, injustice to the people who were doing no harm. The king was mad, and instead of killing Haman right then, he walked out of the room. He went into the garden. That's verse 7. And Haman stood up to Esther to make a request for her life, for he saw that the king was determined to do evil by him. The king was not happy with him because now he had not only put his wife in this thing, but he had put everybody, all the Jews in this thing, and Haman was the one who did it. Excuse me. So then the king returned out of his palace, out of the garden, and into the place of the banquet. And Haman was now laying on the bed that Esther was on. Oh my goodness. So now the king is hot. He is so mad. He is mad because, first of all, Haman tried to kill his wife and all her people. Haman is now laying on Esther's bed and says, will he force the queen also right here in my house? Will he try to rape her? What is he doing? What's going on, Haman? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face, knowing that Haman knew that his end was there. And so one of the other people, you have to know that just because people see you and hear you, they are not always your friends. One of the other people standing by, one of the chamber people, said, King, he also built gallows 75 feet high in order for Mordecai, one of the Jews, to be hanged. The king said, what? He's done what? So everybody doesn't have your best interest at heart. And just because somebody's done wrong, that's not for us to retaliate. We have to take the line of Esther. Esther didn't come out swinging, didn't come and take her own knife and jab Haman in the heart. And she didn't take injustice into her own hands. Esther gave the injustice to God, because God will punish injustice. The scripture says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. And that's not just God is going to repay you for what's going on. He's going to repay you for the things that you lost. You go to the book of Joel, 2nd chapter, he says the things that the cankerworm and the cutting worm and the caterpillar and the locust, my great armies, those things I'm going to restore. God will restore to you any injustice that is done. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And that's where we get that idiom or that saying oftentimes, that be careful at the grave that you dig, because you're probably you should be digging one for yourself. So we have to be aware that even though injustice is happening, injustice happens in the world. Injustice happens to black people. Injustice happens to white people. Injustice happens to the Jews. Injustice happens to everybody. But if you trust in God, if you believe God's word, God will punish whatever injustice that there is. God will punish it. God will reward those who are wicked. He will give them their just reward. So all of these lessons have been talking about justice and the judgment of God, and how God is just, and how God is fair, and how God is righteous, and how we are to live righteously. Esther got justice for the people, because later on, which we are not going through in this lesson, later on she and Mordecai get to write a letter, and that letter basically says that the Jews have a right to arm themselves when the soldiers come to kill them and shoot them and all that kind of stuff and try to eradicate them, because the king's law was there. So injustice will be punished. Yes, in today's society, there are all kinds of injustices. Our job is not to go and get vengeance. Our job is not to go and try to make it right ourselves. Our job is to put it in the hands of God, who will get justice, but it will be righteous justice on all. So whoever I'm talking to today, whoever I'm sharing this with, I need you to know that this justice is justice for all. It's not just a justice where man decides what is right. And you can talk about all kinds of movies where they decided within themselves what is right and what is wrong and how they're going to do this and how they're going to do that. But we have to know that the justice that this is talking about means that our trust is in God. Now, I'm open for questions. I'm open for whatever. And they're going to tell me if you have written in some questions on Facebook. If you've written in some questions, I'll try to answer those and give you some feedback about injustice will be punished. Because this was a good lesson about injustice, and injustice was being done. And then Mordecai got justice. Esther got justice. Haman got his own justice. So there it is. Everybody got justice, because the scripture said, or the title of this lesson is Injustice Will Be Punished. All right. Well, we don't see any questions. We don't see any questions. So I'm going to wrap this lesson up. I'm going to wrap this lesson up with the light on the word. Esther knew that if she were to appeal to the king's sense of justice, God would have used the king to implement justice on her behalf. She uses her great beauty. She uses her intelligence to outsmart Haman. But she also invokes the presence of God. Now, while in this lesson we do not find the word God in the entire book of Esther, we do not find where they pray, but we do know that in the book of Esther they fast. So Esther fasts, Esther prays, Esther calls on or invokes the Spirit of God, even though the word is not used in that scripture. Have any questions come in? All right. We are thankful for this lesson. We are thankful that injustice will be punished. We don't have to go and try to get vengeance ourselves. We don't have to go and try to get justice ourselves. If we rely on God, yes, God will take care of us.
Can we fast and expect the same results?
Can we fast
in the face of adversity
and expect the same results in the face of adversity? Yes, we can fast and expect results in the face of adversity. Remember, your fasting has to be focused. Your fasting has to be, if we go to the book of Isaiah, if we go to the If we go to the book of Isaiah, Isaiah says this is the fast that he has chosen to break the bands of wickedness, to undo heavy burdens. If we are fasting like that, then yes, we can expect the same results. If we are fasting because we're trying to get back at people, then no, we're not going to expect the same results. Esther's fasting was focused. Esther's fasting was a determination for a specific reason. So, yes, we can expect the same results if we fast like Esther.
Ask people to share everything out.
Go ahead and share everything on your Facebook page. Go ahead and share everything on your Facebook page. Thank you so much for attending Sunday school this morning. And we will see you at church time.